Welcome back, everybody, to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, your host, and now it's time for me to introduce my guest, Maggie Lord. Maggie is an early pioneer in the online digital wedding media space. As the founder and CEO of Rustic Wedding Chic, Maggie led her company for 12 years before it was bought by David's Bridal in 2020. Maggie is also the author of 6 books. Today, Maggie has become a sought-after strategic advisor for female-founded brands, allowing her to focus on sharing her knowledge and expertise with other like-minded entrepreneurs. Maggie and her entrepreneurs have been featured in Forbes, the New York Times, Business Insider, Success Magazine, and so much more. For more information, you can go to maggielord.com. Hi, Maggie. So nice to have you on the Small Biz Chat podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, you got to tell me your backstory. How did you become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I started a business at 26. I was finishing grad school. I was currently engaged to my now husband. I was very excited about it. But if you go back to 2007, 2008, there was no Pinterest, there was no Instagram. There was not a really great way to communicate your vision to your vendors. There was a few other wedding blogs at the time, but it was really kind of more of a personal blog space. And I started to really find great content, and I worked with photographers to feature all of their beautiful weddings. And we literally had a readership before I had a plan for the company. And fast forward a couple of years after that, we were able to be very early on in the process with Pinterest and Instagram. And that led to that next boom for us, where we were able to amass millions of monthly readers. I was very excited over those years to be able to license our name to product. And like you said, write books, and really kind of stand out in the wedding world, which led me to the point where I had then gotten married and had 3 kids through the process. And even though I loved being an entrepreneur and loved Rustic Wedding Chic, I felt it was like the kid who doesn't go to college and lives in your basement. Like it was time for the business to go to its next level. I had been a solo entrepreneur for all those years with contractors and very junior staff, and, was really ready for the company to move to its next phase. And it was acquired by David's Bridal in 2020.
Wow. And you dodged the bullet with that, because David's Bridal bought your company, and then Lord, David's Bridal got into trouble right after they did it. So I hope the check, you got all your money up front. All right. So let's talk about the key components of a solid exit strategy, right? Because everything I know, I actually, interestingly enough, started my business when I was 26 years old. So I'm celebrating 25 years this year. So what I want to talk to you about is, how early do you have to kind of develop your strategy if one day you want to sell your business? Because I'm assuming it's not a 1 year, 2 year kind of thing, is it?
No, a lot of the female founders and brands that I work with now, whether I'm consulting or doing business coaching or helping them with their exit plan, is we're really crafting something earlier on in their journey than they ever think. Because I always say what happens is when you get to the point of desperation, or you have to sell for financial reasons, or you've got burnout. And I always say a tired entrepreneur is not an attractive acquisition. So start your roadmap about a possible exit strategy or multiple exit strategies, right? Because if you're just building your business and if you're in go mode right now, you might not know where the company is going to lead you over the next few years. So you might have a couple of different exit strategies in your back pocket, but it's never too early to think about, while you're building it, who could potentially be interested in you one day.
I think that is brilliant advice. So what stage of the business cycle do you suggest people start planning? Is it like 3 years in, 5 years in, after they kind of survive the 5-year itch thing? Like, when do you think it's the right time?
Yeah, I think there's usually a sweet spot, and it's different for everybody, every business and every entrepreneur. But I will say that if you try to exit too early, it's usually not as successful. And if you try to exit, as like I said, when you've gotten to the point where you need to exit, you're not as attractive, and you usually don't get such a sweet deal out of it. So if you're kind of in those middle years of I'm not tired of this passion yet, I still have a lot of fuel, right? The company's doing well financially for whatever, sector you're in. And I wake up every day still feeling happy to go to work. Those are the years where you're the most attractive to a buyer. Because what they want to know is when they acquire your company, you might go with it to that next company. And they want to make sure you still have passion if you're leading the brand for them. You want to get to the point where you don't want to be in that space, which I've counseled customers and clients like this, where they're actually have gotten to be so successful that the pool of buyers that can buy them now is so small. So it's better to be in that middle stage where you have a lot of interesting parties that could potentially acquire you, and you're kind of a standout among your competition.
I love it. I love it. Now, what about the financial preparation side of it? It's like, okay, if I'm 5 to 7 years in, maybe it's time to start thinking about it. But what do I got to have in place financially in terms of paperwork for, to go through the due diligence process with a potential buyer?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I learned a lot through my acquisition. And, because I was a solo entrepreneur and because I, really ran the company by myself, I didn't have like data rooms set up for people to view, right? Like we just weren't at that level of the company. So what you want to do is save yourself time and frustration so that when either someone comes to you and wants to look at an acquisition, you're not scrambling to find all those pieces that you need to provide for them. So if you go into due diligence, they're going to need to see the financials for the companies. They're going to want to look at the, past maybe 3 to 5 years of tax returns, right? Definitely, if you have an accountant or a CPA that you work with, make sure that they know that you're going to head into an acquisition phase, because that would allow them to pull what they need. But besides the financials, it's really important to have things like a company one sheet that highlights all your best features. It's something that you can easily circulate. It allows for you to share and brag about your social following or your customer base or whatever it is that really showcases why you stand out. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, even if you're a small business, it's important to have some sort of brand Bible that, I used to say, since I led the company on my own, if I got hit by a bus, no one would even know how to update something in the company, right? So it's important to build some of those pieces and have that available. So when that attractive acquisition, partner comes to the table, you have what you need to get that conversation rolling quickly.
Now, speaking of buyers, like how do you identify good people that might be a potential? Did you call David's Bridal's 800 number and talk to the president? I mean, like, how did you get to the point where you were able to kind of recognize who you should be looking at as a buyer?
Yeah. Well, I think what happens with a lot of people I've spoken to is they look at someone who is either a direct competitor and they think, oh, they'll want to absorb us. And sometimes that happens. But, I think you really have to get creative. And I tell all my clients, no matter what phase we're in, that you really should have an ongoing running list of potential buyers at some point, right? Just keep that living, breathing document going, add to it, as interesting companies come across your screen. I actually did email the CEO of David's Bridal and talked about how Rustic Wedding Chic was going to go on the public market, but I had a handful of ideal partners that I wanted to talk to before. I had gone down the knot with a lot of other media companies that were interested in acquiring us. But I knew the secret sauce in the way that you need to communicate to someone who's interested in purchasing you is what can you do to expand their customer life cycle, right? So Rustic Wedding Chic obviously got in front of the bride at 12 to 14 months before her wedding. David's Bridal, really engages when she's ready to purchase, which is usually around 9 months. So we were extending the life of being able to communicate with the customer. So it's those creative ways that you can look at who you could be working with, who could potentially acquire you, and how that is going to help them be able to either reach more customers, be able to extend their sales funnel, whatever it is. But I'm a firm believer in that usually the person who's perfect to purchase you is not the one that automatically just comes up as the first thing in your brain.
I love it. I love it. And when we come right back, we're going to talk more with Maggie Lord about what you need to know one day if you want to sell your business. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast. Stay with us. Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, the Small Biz Lady, and I want to welcome you to smallbizladyacademy.com.
your go-to resource for women entrepreneurs. Whether you're just starting out or ready to grow, we've got everything you need to succeed. From expert interviews to live coaching sessions, our platform offers practical tools and strategies to help you build a profitable small business. Join our vibrant community of like-minded entrepreneurs today and take your business to new heights. Visit smallbizladyacademy.com and start your journey.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host, and I'm talking with Maggie Lord about what you need to know if you want to have a successful exit from your business. All right, Maggie, I got to ask you. So how do I get fair value for my business? Because it seems like valuation is in the eye of the beholder. So talk to me about, how you were able to negotiate that.
Yeah. So when you're really looking at your company, I think a lot of times people come to the table and just think straight numbers. And if they have some sort of sales, it's going to be, it's 5X, 10X, 3X, whatever it is. I say scrap that completely because it's about getting creative, because there are things to you and your company that are of value that you can't put a dollar amount on, such as your social footprint. Is that massive, right? How does that translate to dollars for you? So when trying to come up with a valuation, yes, there are some things that you can look at, the revenue that the company is making, all of those sort of things. But I would say look at a full 360 scope of the brand and put a dollar value on those things that the person who's going to acquire you can't automatically easily get. So again, if it's like the social footprint that you have, that's going to allow them to scale your brand so much better and easier. And so I would say it's not just about a straight numbers game. It's about looking at the entire company and seeing where your company has value.
I love that. And then tell me, how important is confidentiality when you're first starting the sales process and when you're close to actually closing the sales process? How does that, how can you kind of keep your potential buyers from outing you to even your staff or other potential customers?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like dating, where in the beginning it's all roses and everything's fantastic and beautiful. And as you get, through the process longer and longer and longer, it starts to get, sometimes can be frustrating, and sometimes it doesn't end with an actual acquisition. And so you would want to make sure that all the information that you've shared has been kept, perfectly confidential. And so, normally after maybe just one or two very light conversations, you would enter, into some sort of NDA, which really allows you to say everything we share from a legal standpoint is going to stay between us. Because if it doesn't end in an acquisition, you're going out again to new businesses and you don't want anything shared about, what you're doing. You absolutely can decide when it's right for you, if you have a staff or people who you work with, that you're going to share that information. So those are things that you can mutually agree upon, but you always have to look out for yourself because it doesn't always end in that perfect acquisition marriage.
And then how long does the process take? How long did it take you from the time David's Bridal acted like they were interested to the point where somebody handed you a check? How long did that take?
So it's a little unique because it was 2020. I met the David's team in New York in March of 2020, 1 week before the world shut down. We had terms in a deal and everything was pretty much wrapped up. And I went over to the executive team at David's in July of that year. It was publicly announced in October. Okay. So I have worked with clients where they are in a due diligence and they have a letter of intent from a company, sometimes a month, 3 months, 6 months. It doesn't always have to be really drawn out. So you can say to yourself, you can obviously say to anybody you're speaking with, I'd like this to be let's fast track it. I'd like this to be, something that moves quickly so that we can move on with business. So I would say anywhere, the normal time that, of course, with legal things that come into it, take the longest. So I'd say you're looking anywhere from 3, 6 to 9 months to actually getting something done.
Now, that's really interesting. You are the shortest person I have ever talked to that has sold a business. Everybody else I know is it could take 14 to 24 months. So that's really interesting that your process in the middle of the pandemic still moved forward so quickly. I guess because people had time on their hands so they could focus on it. I don't know. But That's really fascinating. So my last question for you is this simply: what is the best business advice someone gave you during this whole process of exiting your business?
Yeah, the best business advice I ever got was that passion can be a profit, right? You can turn a passion into a profit. During this process, it really was, don't cash that check in your brain before it's done. I had been told many times that you can get down to the wire and the acquisition doesn't go through. And of course, that would be devastating. So someone said to me, don't cash that check mentally until everything is signed, sealed, and it's over and done.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, I really appreciate this information. You have absolutely no idea how timely it is for me, and we'll talk offline about that. But anyway, when we come right back on the Small Biz Chat podcast, we're going to talk about sales and the role of marketing in your successful sales process. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast, and we will be right back.